Dear friends, good morning. I'm honored to have been invited to deliver the keynote at Crisil's annual Infrastructure Summit. It is a privilege to speak at an event hosted by an institution that laid the foundations for the development of credit ratings and advisory services in India. It is said that the stories of yesterday are the blueprints of tomorrow. I say this because all we need to do is look back to realize that some of the most dominating times in a nation's history have been the times when they dominated the infrastructure landscape. Even in the ancient world, the Romans had built out an extensive network of over 400,000 kilometers of roads and bridges that spanned rivers and valleys to help with the efficient movement of goods and military. This helped connect their entire empire that spread across several countries. The roads of Rome paved their path to building one of the greatest civilizations of all time. Similarly, the great industrial revolutions, which saw a massive investment in roads, railroads, ports, bridges, and telegraph systems, resulted in an economic boom that accelerated the path for Great Britain to become one of the most powerful nations in the world. And in more recent times, the Chinese infrastructure reforms that started in the late 1970s led to the fastest ever build out of infrastructure. The outcomes are manifested in the progress China has visibly demonstrated. These are all proof points of the fact that infrastructure is a fundamental to any strong economy. In my talk today, I will focus on three key areas. One, the role of government policies and governance in building infrastructures. Second, the future of infrastructure and its interconnection with sustainability. And third, Adani's areas of focus and the role we are playing in developing national infrastructure. I can very confidently say that as we stand here today, India's infrastructure industries is undergoing a stunning change, the impact of which we will be able to appreciate fully when we look back a decade later. We have kick-started an infrastructure capex cycle never seen before. And this lays the foundation for several decades of India's growth. And this starts with the quality of governance. Very few sectors globally are as tightly linked with a government policy as infrastructure. Therefore, before I talk about India and then the future of infrastructure, it is important that we understand how policy changes were necessary to get us here. So let me take you back to 1991, the year India's economic liberalization was initiated. The reforms announced by the late Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao ji and the finance minister at that time, Dr. Manmohan Singh, came to be collectively known as the LPG reforms. This stood for liberalizations, privatizations, and globalization. The reforms marked a watershed moment in India's economic history and dismantled the license Raj, which had seen the government involved in almost every approval that businesses needed. By initiating the 1991 market-friendly reforms, India unlocked the potential of its private sector and set the stage for its subsequent expansion. The statistics tell the story. As per World Bank data, in the 3 decades prior to liberalizations, the Indian GDP grew by 7 times. And in the 3 decades post-liberalizations, our GDP grew by 14 times. There could be no better validations than these numbers on the power of liberalizations. My dear friends, during the license Raj, India's business landscape was dominated by a few established business houses, which navigated the heavily regulated environment by developing strong ties with the government. They tightly managed the licensing requirements. Most of these companies survived in a protected market where entry barriers were very high and there was little penalty for inefficiency. Looking back, I firmly believe that the restriction of capital flows and the tight controls on exports and imports ended up doing significant damage, especially to the capital-intensive infrastructure sector. However, the liberalization in 1991 marked a major turning point. The breaking down of the license Raj mean that the government did away with the industrial licensing for most of the sectors. It eliminated much of the requirement for businesses to obtain government permission, to invest or set prices or build capacity. All of us have heard that it is the most adaptive that survive, and the post-liberalizations period proved this again. The majority of the slow-moving pre-liberalization businesses failed to adapt to this market-oriented economy. They either vanished or never lived up to their full potential, much in contrast to the post-liberalizations Indian companies of today. My dear friends, if the period between 1991 and 2014 was about putting down the foundation and building the runway, the period for 2014 to 2024 has been about the aircraft taking off. And a strong example of this takeoff is the National Infrastructure Pipeline, the NIP program. The core essence of the NIP is its integrated approach involving participation from both the public and private sectors, with the funding model divided between the two. I consider the NIP program that has earmarked a projected investment of rupees 111 lakh crores over the period of FY20, FY25 as a benchmark of how a government can put in place a national view of over 9,000 infrastructure projects across sectors like energy, logistics, water, airports, and a social infrastructure. And like I said, in my view, the single most important catalyst enabling this takeoff has been the quality of governance that we have witnessed over the past decade, and the metrics speaks for themselves. India's fiscal investment has doubled from 1.6% of GDP to 3.3% of GDP. Corporate income tax rates have fallen from 30% to 22%, creating a headroom for corporates to invest. And the current account deficit fell from 3.5% of GDP to 0.8% of GDP. These outcomes are fundamentally rooted in this government effectiveness in institutionalizing policy for transforming our nation's landscape from one of the challenges to one of possibilities. And the results are visible to all. Let me elaborate more on three areas I commonly hear. First, almost every foreign visitor that I meet these days during talks about extraordinary infrastructure growth they see in India. Be it the quality of multi-lane highways, the massive construction projects all over the country, access to ports across the nation's coastline, the rapid penetration of green energy, a world-class and modern transmission grid, dedicated freight corridors, the quality and access to airports across the country, several new metro rail networks, and the massive trans-sea links. Second, the Indian government's Aadhaar UPI infrastructure has transformed the financial ecosystem in India. These systems has democratized access to financial services to such an extreme level that it has allowed even the previously unbanked populations to participate in the digital economy. While it may only be perceived as a verification of payment layer, the implication of UPI have been far larger in terms of productivity gains and formalizations of the economy. This has led to the stronger tax collections that we have already started to witness. It has also spurred the growth of fintech companies, streamlined subsidy distribution, and enhanced transparency, contributing significantly to the country's digital transformation and its economic growth. And the third is the very visible aspect about the youngness of India that we formally call demographic dividend. India's median age stands at less than 29 years, while China's median age today is already at 39. What is more remarkable, that even in 2050, India's median age will be just 39 years. This means that India will be at its peak consumptions for at least the next 3 to 4 decades. No other nation will have this scale advantage of our domestic demand. In terms of number, our estimates show that by the end of FY32, the year India has targeted to become a $10 trillion economy, the cumulative spend on infrastructure will exceed $2.5 trillion. These are all indicative of the potential of India, and I can confidently state that the platform to create totally new market spaces in India is now in place. My dear friends, while every conventional infrastructure sector continues to show strong growth, the two emerging ones that I am most excited about are: one, infrastructure to enable energy transition, and second, digital infrastructure. And both of these areas are fast converging and reshaping the landscape of sustainability to create unprecedented market opportunity. The rapid shift to renewable energy sources, coupled with the digitizations of industries, is not just a technological evolution, but also a profound transformation of our entire society. This dynamic intersection is driving innovation in energy efficiency, smart grids, and green technologies, and unlocking a new value chains. And as data centers and digital infrastructure demand more energy, the push for sustainable solutions becomes even more critical. The scale of opportunity that this new transformation presents for businesses in India is expected to be in trillions of dollars over the next 3 decades. Let me first expand on the energy transition space. This will fundamentally change the global energy landscape forever. The global transition market was valued at approximately $3 trillion in 2023 and is expected to grow nearly $6 trillion by 2030, and thereafter double every 10 years till 2050. As many of you know, in the case of India, our country aims to install 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. This ambitious target will require annual investment of over $150 billion. The transition to green energy in India is expected to generate millions of new jobs in a sector such as solar and wind, energy storage, hydrogen and its derivatives, EV charging stations, as well as grid infrastructure development. The energy businesses that help to enable this transition will also create opportunity to monetize carbon credits. In fact, the Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets estimates that the demand for carbon credits could grow at over 30% and exceed $3 trillion by 2030. Therefore, I would go as far as to say that in the days ahead, the availability of the green electron will be the primary driver of our nation's economic progress. And in my opinion, the market size of the green electron as of now has no limits. Now let me talk about the digital infrastructure space and the emerging opportunity here. As all of us increasingly rely on our digital platforms for almost everything we do, it is leading to an explosive growth in our data generation. Data is indeed the new oil, and this has meant that we have now arrived arrived at a world where the AI revolution sits at the core of every digital initiative. And at the heart of all these actions is the data centers, the critical infrastructure needed to power all forms of computational needs, especially AI workloads for machine learning algorithms, natural language processing, computer vision, and deep learnings. All of this is dependent on the ability to process data at unprecedented speed and scale, which are the precise capabilities that data centers provide. However, this will need a massive amounts of energy, making the data center business the largest energy consuming industries in the world. This makes the energy transitions even more complex and is raising the electricity prices, thereby adding to the already high prices because of the combined impact of a climate change and a demand growth. The fact is that the infrastructure required for energy transitions and the infrastructure required for our digital transformations are now inseparable as the technology sector becomes the largest consumer of the precious green electrons. My dear friends, we are well aware that there is no greater multiplier for GDP growth than that delivered by infrastructure investment. It is the foundation that allows efficient and frictionless flow. The flow of goods, electrons, molecules, data and people. And all of these flows are either core business driver or enable adjacent business for the Adani Group. And over the past 30 years, we have leveraged these drivers to become the world's second largest solar power company, India's largest airport operator with 25% passenger traffic and a 40% of air cargo, India's largest ports and logistic company with a 30% of national market share, India's largest integrated energy player spanning across generation, transmission and distribution, LNG and LPG terminals, and city gas and pipe gas distributions. India's second largest cement manufacturer, and several other new sectors, including metals, petrochemicals, aerospace and defense, super apps, and industrial clouds. However, while our past stands as a monument to our resilience and success, the emerging future opportunities are even more exciting. And nothing holds more potential than the two I have outlined, the energy transition space and the digital infrastructure space. These are trillion-dollar opportunities to capitalize on and will transform India both at a local and at a global space. This is why the Adani Group is making a massive investment in both these areas. The next decade will see us invest more than $100 billion in the energy transition space and further expand our integrated renewable energy value chain that today already spans the manufacturing of every major components required for green energy generations. We are confident that we will produce the world's least expensive green electron that will become the feedstock for several sectors that must meet the sustainability mandate. And to make this happen, we are already building the world's largest single-site renewable energy park at Khavda in the district of Kutch. Just this single location will generate 30 gigawatt of power, thereby taking to our total renewable energy capacity to 50 gigawatt by 2030. And when it comes to our digital footprint, this is already in the works and will span industrial clouds across each of our businesses that we will productize and then make it to market. Operational, technology, cybersecurity offerings, given our expertise in managing a vast variety of critical infrastructure operations. Super apps to leverage our B2C business across our wide variety of consumer-facing businesses. Artificial Intelligence Lab to capitalize on India's fast emerging expertise to provide AI services to the world. And data centers that will form the backbone of the energy-intensive digital revolutions. In fact, it is anticipated that by year 2030, the world will need 100 to 150 gigawatt of additional green energy just for the AI data centers. We already have India's largest order book of data centers and are now in discussion for additional gigawatt scale green AI data centers which we are uniquely positioned to deliver. My dear friends, as I start wrapping up, allow me to summarize with some bold thoughts. Our democracy is 76 years old. It took us 58 years to get our first $1 trillion of GDP, 12 years to get the next trillion, and just 5 years for the third $1 trillion. Given the pace at which India is growing and the way the government has been executing social and economic reforms, I anticipate that within the next decade, India will start adding $1 trillion to its GDP every 12 to 18 months. This will put us well on track to be a $30 trillion economy by 2050. At this time, I expect the stock market capitalizations to have exceeded $40 trillion. What this effectively means is that over the next 26 years, India will potentially add $36 trillion to its stock market capitalizations. No other nation is remotely close to such a scale of possibility. So, my dear friends, let me conclude by painting a picture for all of us. Imagine for a moment standing at the edge of a vast ocean, our dreams on the far shore across the waters. The waters are turbulent at times, yet here we are, ready to build the bridge to cross it. Our hopes, our optimisms, our beliefs, and our spirits align to fulfill our aspiration as we work together to bring India back to its full glory. My dear friends, this is why I say there has never been a better time to be Indian. Jai Hind. Thank you.